With the success of the basketball program over the years, there have been 38 University of Connecticut players who have played in the NBA. And the first was Worthy Patterson.
Connecticut wins by a point. Patterson wins the ball game on a drive.
At 6'3" and 175 pounds, Patterson was a standout scorer and defender, averaging close to a double-double for points and rebounds during his college career. He was the first black player to captain any team sport at UConn and elevated the basketball program to national prominence in the 1950s. Patterson went on to the NBA in 1957, becoming one of the first black players to integrate the St. Louis Hawks.
He could dribble, pass, shoot, defend anywhere, and he was supremely athletic. He was dunking at ease before, dunking was pretty big, and he was a big guard, because my dad was 6'3", played the point a lot.
Following his playing days, Patterson made his mark in the business world, becoming one of the first black executives in the music industry, working with some of the most popular artists in the world.
How about Worthy Patterson? Played from 1950 to 1954. Look at how young he looks.
He looks great.
In 2012, UConn recognized Patterson's excellence in basketball and inducted him into the Huskies of Honor. His number 13 is up on the wall at Gampo Pavilion for all to see.
Okay.
At 91 years of age, Patterson continues to push boundaries. It's emblematic of the ambition and drive that's enabled Patterson to navigate around the discrimination and racism that he's encountered during his life.
When it's all white, and you're the only one that's not, you get comfortable in that environment. Then you can learn how it operates. It taught me how to maneuver in mainstream America.
Patterson's grandfather, June Mormon, grew up in Virginia and moved north in the early 1900s.
My grandfather was a combustion engineer, and he ran a wholesale hotel laundry. And they did all the sheets and pillowcases and stuff. And I would see all of these people come in and talk to him. And they were all dressed up, and they had their briefcase, and then they'd go to lunch. And all these guys are always dressed up, clean as the Board of Health. It wasn't like they worked in a factory or anything. My grandfather used to say, well, you'll never be able to get that kind of job. I said, oh, okay. But I had it filed away that back there that, I think I want to be one of those guys that walks around in a suit and a briefcase and goes to lunch. I like that.
Patterson was born in 1931 in Greenwich, Connecticut, and grew up in this house on Northfield Street. His mother, May, was also born in Greenwich and graduated from Greenwich High School. People describe May as a strong, sophisticated woman and an entrepreneur.
She's kind of a Renaissance woman. Her business was, she was a dressmaker tailor of women's clothes. She turned the dining room into the workplace. She was really, really good. And she didn't want to open up a store because she had 2 boys to take care of. And her clientele were Greenwich, Fortune 500 people. I was tailored. Like everything I owned was fitted.
May was a single mother who raised Patterson and his younger brother Roland in a town that was almost entirely white. Yet she was determined to make sure that her sons had the same opportunities as everybody else in Greenwich.
Everything their kids did, we did. But just on a less expensive level. But we did everything. Like we went to summer camp, we went to Broadway, we went to all the shows, we got all this exposed, museums. We did everything they did.
And one of Patterson's mother's priorities was education.
When I was a freshman, they put me in a general course, because that's what they did, to the minorities. Like as soon as I came home with the schedule, the next morning we went to school together. And an hour later, I was in a college prep course. My grandfather, who came from the South, right, he grew up in segregated Virginia. So, I got a good cross-section of what's going on by law, which was the South, and what was going on by discrimination, which was, where we were in the Northeast. If it was an incident, then you explained what happened, and they would explain to you, basically why it happened. But they're usually black and white situations. When I was little, like in grammar school, I was bullied all the time. My grandfather used to say, you could come home crying, or you could handle it. Now there's two ways to handle it. If he's your size, punch him. And if he's much bigger, get a stick. My mother used to holler at him for telling me that.
Patterson regularly walked to the Boys and Girls Club, which was a mile from his house, because that's where the black kids played ball. Meanwhile, the YMCA was only a couple of blocks away from the Patterson house, but the Y had yet to accept black members until Patterson's mother made a few phone calls.
She started doing her thing, right? It's a little question here, question there, a little politicking here. And next thing you know, my brother and I were admitted. The Y was very fancy. Basketball, we had top flight instruction because they brought in, the best coaches. You pick up the skills and where to go and what to do and how to play.
With his newfound skills and athleticism as a seventh grader in 1944, Patterson remembers wanting to grow up and become a professional basketball player, which took a lot of imagination given the times.
There was no Jackie Robinson, there was nothing. And there were no black players. Then he became more important. And then I got into the basketball guys, right? Earl Lloyd's and Charlie Cooper's, who were the first and second. Then I figured, okay, now I got a good chance because a couple guys have already been there. So if I'm good enough, I'm gonna be okay.
Patterson was developing into a standout high school athlete where he played basketball, baseball, and quarterbacked the football team.
I was a freshman in 1945. To have a black quarterback, who ever heard of that? The only black quarterbacks anybody had was at the black high schools, below the Mason-Dixon, where the schools were segregated.
Ultimately, Patterson excelled at basketball and became one of the best high school players in Connecticut. And with his success came more attention and taunting.
Ignored it. And when I got home, I tell my mother what happened, and she'd say, "Yeah, good, you did the right thing, because you're going to get more. Now that you're in high school and you're playing and people are starting to know you're going to get more of that. So get ready, to handle it." In high school gymnasiums and arenas, small places where the people are right up on the court, those are brutal. Because then they pull your pants, they pull the hair on your leg, they call you names. They're like, they're all over you.
Patterson graduated high school and headed to New Hampshire for a year of prep school at Tilton, where he continued to play quarterback. But he knew his future was in basketball.
I grew more, I got stronger, just because I was getting older, because I had the basics, and it just got better. As well as I played, right? No, I had no scholarships.
And why was that?
Because we're back to it again. Discrimination, actually, is what it was. I figured I would probably wind up at University of Connecticut because, I'm from Connecticut. I think the people that were in charge of the program were progressive. There was already a black kid on the team. They told me that I was the first recruit when they were going big time.
In Greenwich, Tilton, and now on the campus of UConn, Patterson was one of the few black students, but he remained confident and focused on reaching his potential.
The University of Connecticut, I say we had maybe 16 or 17,000. We had 20, minority people. You were always the only one. And if you were uncomfortable, you had problems. But I was never uncomfortable. I was right in the middle. Sometimes I didn't even know I was a minority. I forgot about it. Just gonna do my thing, right? Not to worry.
He could drive and then just pull up for a jump shot and rebound with the best of them, because Worthy could really jump then. I don't know about today, but Worthy was always very cool. He had a walk going across campus that you'd recognize him from a mile and a half away. He just ambled by like not a care in the world, and he seemed as if nothing bothered him. He's big, handsome, charismatic, star of the basketball team, but in my mind, he was just my fraternity brother.
In 1951, Beta Sigma Gamma fraternity was one of the first interracial fraternities in America.
Some special people in this group here.
And they frowned on typical frat behavior, like hazing and initiation rituals. This fraternity revolved around brotherhood.
He didn't even consider who was next to you, what their skin color. That had nothing to do with anything. Always carried that, I think, ever since then.
And we had the jocks, and we had the musicians,
Right.
and we had a comic, and we had all these people, that were talented, and it was a mix.
When you think about our fraternity 70 years ago, we had this group of guys living together, black, white, Japanese, Russian. This is going to be the exemplar for the future.
Dissimilar people in a similar situation that could spread the gospel.
We were looking through the class book trying to find black men, and we would say, there's one, there's one, there's one. And that next day, I was on my way to class, and I happened to look up, and I saw Worthy coming toward me.
Were you aware that he was a basketball player?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Queen Vaughn grew up in New Haven and had transferred to UConn from Hampton Institute in Virginia. She and Patterson started dating as UConn students in the early 1950s and had been married ever since.
Also, he was ROTC, so that meant he got a check so we could have nice meals at the end of the month.
So she was after you for your wallet.
That's right. After me for my money from day one.
I thought he was good looking, popular, a gentleman, and a person of integrity. I always look at their shoes if they're shined and his fingernails if they're clean. And he met all the criteria. Describe him as a basketball player? Well, he was smart, he had a savvy, because I also played basketball every day before I met him in New Haven. He's a good shooter, nice set shooter. He had a set shot and made his fouls, and his legs are fantastic. All the girls loved his legs. He was the king of the campus. When they had the end of the year big dance, he was the king. I wasn't the queen, but he was the king. But always a gentleman. Of course, the girls were always there, asking for autographs on anything. Slips, panties, whatever. But he was never impressed. I think his mother raised him well.
Early on, UConn head coach Hugh Greer recognized Patterson's potential and prescribed ways to develop his leadership skills.
Coach required me to do speech and drama. I hated the drama part. I wasn't crazy about the speech part either, but as we got going, and I got better, it got easier, then it was no big deal. It was one of the best things that ever happened, because over my career, I wound up making tons of speeches.
Greer also coached the UConn tennis team, so he took full advantage of his basketball star's athletic versatility and had Patterson on the conference champion tennis team. For his senior season in 1954, Patterson was named the captain of the basketball team, making him the first black captain of any sport in UConn's history.
When things got tough on the floor, they'd look and say, okay, what are we doing, Worth? And away we went. But it was special. That's my DNA. I always want to be in charge. I'm going to be the best. I'm going to be in charge.
The talk about UConn becoming big time when Patterson first came to campus in 1950 had turned into reality. In that stretch, UConn won over 80% of their games, led by Patterson, who was named to the All-Conference and All-New England teams. Standing in UConn's way as the best team in New England was perennial powerhouse Holy Cross. The showdown took place in UConn's second-to-last game of the regular season on February 27, 1954. The Saturday night game was played at Worcester Auditorium, where Holy Cross had a 47-game winning streak.
It was the biggest game on its schedule. We thought Holy Cross would probably be the toughest of them, and as it turned out, they were.
UConn had a record of 20-2, and Holy Cross was 22-1, and ranked 7th best in the country. The Huskies' Art Quimby's basket put UConn up 76-75 with less than a minute to play.
There was only like 10 seconds left, and I was dribbling around, running out the clock. And they pounced me.
UConn rebounded a Holy Cross missed shot, and Patterson was attempting to dribble out the clock when Holy Cross's Ron Perry stole the ball and laid it in to give the Crusaders a 77-76 lead with 14 seconds remaining.
So there was a timeout to get a ball. That's when we set up the eye. When I caught it, there was like 5 seconds left. So I just acted like I was going to shoot it from there, right?
5 seconds to go. Connecticut ball. They'll put it in play with a Hearn.
The guy came flying by. While he was still on the ground, coming, I went right by him. And I just laid it up and it went in. That was it.
At the midcourt line, the pass from a Hearn to Patterson. Worthy starts a drive, goes in, lays it up. Good! Connecticut, 1 second, 4 seconds.
And I just came out of my seat. It was just amazing.
Connecticut wins by a point. Patterson wins the ball game on a drive.
It was just explosive. Everybody was jumping up and down and screaming and hollering.
When we got back to the campus, they called off the curfew, and the whole campus was out partying. It was a great celebration, but it was a great moment in Connecticut basketball because this was the key to becoming big time.
Patterson was also on his way to becoming big time and fulfilling his dream of playing professional basketball. The Boston Celtics invited him to their 1954 training camp and to play in the 16-game preseason. To this point in his life, Patterson had succeeded in navigating or ignoring the racial discrimination around him, but now he was confronted with more direct attacks.
I was like one of the smaller guys in training camp. They got all these guys. Most of them were from the southeast, because they talk in the South. The N-word is like, nice to see you. I wasn't gonna sit still for any of that stuff. So after a couple of days, I said, okay, enough is enough. Somebody's gonna get hit here. Big scrimmage, and Ramsey, who was the #1 draft choice, was guarding me. We went to the jump ball in the center, and he came up with the magic word, and I hit him, and he went down on his knees, and Arbag he didn't see it, so he didn't know what the hell happened. He just saw that, what's his name, bent over. So Kuzi he called him the magic word, and Arbag didn't know what that was. He said, what are you talking about? So Kuz whispered in his ear. So he said, oh, somebody got a hold of him later and said, look, man, you can't do this. You can't talk like you talk when you're on the campus of University of Kentucky. No one ever said anything else, and I never had a problem again.
Patterson impressed Celtics coach Red Auerbach, but no matter how well he played, he was up against institutional racism and the unwritten rule of how many black players were allowed on an NBA team.
1 per team. They didn't want to bring in more than 1 because they thought it would affect the gate. That's the only revenue they got, was from the gate. And they had a few small sponsors, but most sponsors were not really interested in pro basketball at that time. They were scared to have more than 1 black player on a team. Thursday after practice, we sat down. They told me they had made the team, and congratulations, and that was terrific, and I was so excited. The next day, right, we did the photos, the press, the photo shoot. So Saturday, I go to practice. I think I'm going to go to sign the contract because that's what they said. Okay, everything is good. It's marvelous. And they tell me, we're going to have to let you go. So I ask them, what happened? And they said, well, Don Barksdale, who was on a retired list, came off. He came off the retired list. So that now we had 2 blacks on the team. But he was an NBA All-Star with Baltimore Bullets, before he went to the Celtics. And they weren't going to keep a rookie. So he became the colored guy on the Boston Celtics in 1954. And I went back to school.
As Patterson now knows, those Boston Celtics were on the verge of one of the greatest NBA dynasties, and they went on to win 9 championships from 1957 to 1966.
It was devastating. In the time they told me, we're going to have to let you go. This is what happens, right? This has been going on for 150 years or more. This is what happens. And now you got one, that real life you got one. This is what happens.
Patterson returned to UConn, then it was off to Fort Sill in Oklahoma to fulfill his military obligation. Shortly thereafter, Patterson married Queen in 1956.
I said that's why we got married. He wanted somebody to be in Oklahoma in a miserable spot.
It was Patterson's first time living away from the familiar confines of New England.
The segregation and Jim Crow was so bad in Oklahoma that I rarely ever left the campus of the base because they got signs in the window, they colored only, white only. They had a sign in the window that said no, and then they made a list, like Indians, blacks, coloreds, Jews. They listed them right down with a big no like this, and then they listed them right down.
Patterson endured the hostile environment in Oklahoma and kept his basketball skills sharp by playing on the Fort Sill team. As his time in the military was winding down in 1957, he got a letter from the NBA's St. Louis Hawks.
And I looked at Queen and said, "Oh, Queen, I got invited to the Hawks training camp." I said, "We'll stop there on the way home." So we just drove up the great Route 66.
While the scenery changed from Oklahoma to Missouri, the racism and segregation remained the same.
All my teammates were white, and they were not allowed on my side of town, and I was not allowed on their side of town.
While in St. Louis, Patterson befriended the most popular athlete in the city, a future Hall of Fame baseball player.
Stan Musial, he had a restaurant, a steakhouse, best in the city. And he invited me to come and eat there anytime I wanted. And the first night I went, he introduced me, actually, to all of his top patrons in that place. So then I could go in there without being uncomfortable because I wasn't, a novelty.
Patterson played well in the St. Louis training camp, and during that time, the team took advantage of his public speaking skills. They sent Patterson to luncheons in the white community to ease their concerns about desegregating the Hawks.
I had a driver took me to all these locations, and we spoke to the Knights of Columbus, and there must be 6 or 7 different ones. Kind of let them know that there was a black player on the St. Louis Hawks team.
This led to a bizarre scene for Patterson's NBA debut on opening night, when St. Louis's black organizations were protesting to integrate the team and sign a black player on the Hawks.
The Urban League and the NAACP and any of those other groups that you could name were all picketing the auditorium because all the promotion I did was to the white part of the town. And when I went to get in, they gave me a bad time because they said, well, this is why we're out here, is because guys like you are not in there. So I had to get the police to get me in. They got me through the picket line. The cop told me that you better be on a players list or you're in big trouble. I just said to myself, okay, here we go again.
It really was here we go again for Patterson. Frank Selvey, a white player for whom the Hawks had previously paid $30,000, had finished his military service and was ready to return to the team.
Well, what are we going to do? Well, I think we're going to have to let the colored guy go. 30 grand and against me? No chance. Again. I said, okay, that's it. Yeah, twice is enough.
Patterson secured his journey to the NBA by way of Boston, Oklahoma, and St. Louis that resulted in 4 regular season games played had come to an end. In the 1960s, the Patterson family grew with the addition of Worthy III. Queen finished her master's degree and then started teaching school in New York City, and Patterson was working as a salesman for Tuck Tape. And after a lifetime of dealing with racial barriers, Patterson finally got a break during the Civil Rights Movement.
You have to get prepared to get lucky. And in my case, that's what happened. That's when I went to RCA, and that was affirmative action. They were filling the request by the government, Bobby Kennedy, right, to get it done. And they told a few companies, and RCA was one of them, that they had to integrate at the top. And the Urban League was a placement service, for minorities. When I showed up there, they said, oh, this is perfect. I wrote my own schedule, my own training schedule. I had to learn all the tricks of the trade, which I did, how the records get broken. You got to get them heard, and you got to take the artists around to stations and whatnot for interviews and get them on the TV shows and all that stuff.
In 1968, with an above-average dual income, the family sought to return to Patterson's hometown.
I looked in Greenwich because that's where I come from. I wanted to live where I grew up. And there's houses for sale. Then they weren't giving colored people mortgages.
Shut out in his hometown of Greenwich, the Pattersons finally bought a house in Sleepy Hollow, a suburb of New York City.
It was run down, and it had, weeds. It had sunflowers in the front yard that were 4 feet high. It looked like the ghetto. This one house. I needed a handyman, gardener, groundskeeper guy. I got one. He says, you guys almost got burned out. I said, what are you talking about? He said, yeah. He said, they burned a cross in their yard. Could care less. I tell once we get the property and start taking it over and doing it right, we'll have one of the best looking properties in the neighborhood. We'll be fine.
As he continued to climb the corporate ladder, Patterson was now in a position to give other people of color the opportunity to succeed in the record industry.
The higher you go up, the more people you can help. If I'm the #1 salesman, then I hire more guys that look like me. They won't say, well, the white customers won't buy from them. That eliminates that immediately. You got to get to a point where you can help people. And I could put them on a payroll, on the whole payroll, where he gets everything then. He gets benefits. You can get minority people in the mix.
Following his career in the music industry, Patterson retired to Santa Monica, where he is surrounded by his friends and family. While Patterson's trailblazing and place in history have yet to be widely recognized, those closest to him relish the way he's pushed boundaries to achieve success.
Worthy is a class act. It's a rare moment that he'll give you a tidbit of some of the challenges he had in the 50s and 60s. And so he's handled those, I think, with great class and sophistication when I think others might not.
He's not just an athlete or like a businessman, he's so much more than that. I just feel like he represents he's just a great person.
My daughter did a back east college trip. I had somebody at UConn take her to the gym and to see his retired jersey, and that's when it kind of hit her how big time her grandfather was.
I'm sure there's a lot more success stories like my grandpa that also deserve to be told, but his is uniquely his because he's been able to pivot so many times.
5 seconds to go, 77, 76. Connecticut ball. They'll put it in play with Ahern at center at the midcourt line. The pass from Ahern to Patterson. Worthy starts a drive, goes in, lays it up. Good! Connecticut, 1 second, 4 seconds. Connecticut wins by a point. Patterson wins the ball game on a drive.
The story that he could give to others is that if you work hard and you're confident, if you continue and follow your path, you'll be successful.
What do you think your legacy is?
I have no idea.
All right, well, if you had to.
If I had to, I still don't have any idea. I don't know from legacies. You know, that's for somebody else to decide what that's all about. Take a look at the resume, and you think whatever you think it is, that's what it is.